The history of the Sebastian Inlet is long and complex. The history of the inlet today, as we know it, traces back to one man, most likely just about the very first settler in this area. His name was David Peter Gibson. He came down here first in 1859. The highway was that lagoon. There was no I-95, there were no roads, there were no overland trails. To get here, you had to come by boat. As for substantiated attempts to open the Sebastian Inlet here, they really began in earnest in, well, 1872. Things began to really get serious in 1905. There was an organization that mounted an effort and actually opened the inlet. Water flowed through the inlet for 2 weeks. Roy and Orestesso Couch, more than any other human being, was responsible for getting this inlet open, and when he arrived in 1905, he probably witnessed this effort being made to open the inlet and became interested. He was the kind of guy that couldn't take no for an answer. In 1914, he tried but could not get funding for it at that time. And the Hewlett Roads Bill in 1917 was an effort to make it possible for a taxing district to be created. When the vote was taken here in the county, the north end of the county voted against it, and the south end of the county voted for it, and so it didn't happen. Roy Couch continued to lobby for any kind of governmental aid he could. So on May 23rd, 1919, the Sebastian Inlet District came into being. And with that, it was all systems go. Roy Couch had the 6-inch suction dredge ready to go. He got Charlie Sembler Sr. down here at the site, and operations began.
The inlet not only provided a way for navigation for the boats to go out, but it was also a recreation area, and it became very popular. They would bring Model Ts loaded down with lumber and build shanties right along the south shore of the inlet. It was one of the 1933 hurricanes that wiped these little shanties off the map. At the opening of the new decade of 1940, the inlet was doing well. But we had a northeaster, and it came down and it began to close the inlet. Then Pearl Harbor happened. They decided to leave it closed. They were concerned about the U-boats that were showing up in the Atlantic. We even had a tower that was located on the north side of where the inlet was. We had war games too, but they were getting ready to go to the Pacific. The terrain was more like the Pacific Islands that they knew they would have to invade. In 1948, after the war, it was obvious that the inlet had to be reopened. The economy of the whole area depended on it. And the commissioners at that time, one of them in particular, had some connection to be able to get some of the leftover munitions from the war and to open that inlet in a very dramatic way. So once it was opened, it has been maintained since that time until today. By the 50s, they had come up with some very unique and important improvements to the district. The widening and the deepening of the inlet, extending the jetties both north and south. In February of 1965, a new bridge was opened over the inlet connecting Brevard County and Indian River County. During the 70s, the state of Florida decided that this Sebastian Inlet area was the perfect place for a state park.
In the mid-1980s, there was a vacancy on the Sebastian Inlet Tax District Commission, and some folks came to me and asked me if I would consider an appointment from then Governor Bob Martinez. The very first vote that I cast was for the first long-range planning document to be assembled for any inlet around the state of Florida. We needed someone to follow through and execute the long-range management plan. We hired an executive director. We also exercised our influence in maximizing and leveraging grants that were available. When we got into that area, we really started bringing in the higher education and the scientific institutions. But we put it all together and became, in the late 1980s and the early 1990s, really, without a doubt, the gold standard in the state of Florida. And that's where much of the success that you see today, that's when much of it started. building a brand new north jetty that was completely eroded and it was a safety hazard. Allowed to build offices and infrastructure, water, picnic pavilions out on Sandpoint, rock revetments that were on line each side of the inlet, continued planning for navigational markers on the interior of the flood shoal area, and probably the fishing museum and the offices for the park were one of the larger items that we were done, but we enjoy the spoils of all that hard work today. My great-grandfather, whom I was named after, he was the first one here. But chances like that usually come once in a lifetime, and I wasn't going to let it get by.
Well, I started in 2004, and it started with a bang because right after I started, I think about 3 days later was Hurricane Jean, and then Francis followed right after. Then we had a new commission that started right immediately following the storms. The new commission in 2004 took on a stance for fiscal responsibility. And so over about a 3-year period, we reduced our tax rate by 68%. They also believed in cost share with other agencies. In the state of Florida, DEP cost shared with our projects. I think in 10 years, we brought in over $8 million of cost share. Also, Florida Inland Navigation District, and working with them, they helped us with some funding on our channel work and anything that's navigation related. The opening of Sebastian Inlet over the last 100 years has created massive flood shoals from the sand, and so this is prime habitat for seagrass. 240 acres of lush seagrass beds. These beds have been damaged by boaters that zigzag back and forth trying to find their way into the inlet. When we completed our navigation channel, marked the channel, this directed the boaters without crossing the grass beds, without creating prop scars and dredging up the sensitive seagrass. All in all, our economic analysis showed that this inlet is worth about $200 million a year to the local region. We actually deepened and expanded our sand trap, which is a 42-acre depression in the middle of the inlet. About every 4 years, it collects 200,000 cubic yards of sand. By state law, we have to take that sand and then transport it and bypass it to the south to make up for any coastal erosion. Today, I would say that we're a very sophisticated inlet because of the approach to science and management. We are the most data-rich inlet, not only in the state of Florida, but I believe on the east coast of the United States. The Sebastian Inlet is a premier surfing, boating, fishing, sightseeing destination. There's people that come from all over the world to visit this area.